And on my dad's shortwave radio, it's our new friend Ryan Harris. How are you, man?
Doing good, Joe. Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you could join us. I, I, I want to set up my first question this way. I've heard, and fact check me on this. So you're in the NFL. You've got reportedly a 1.2, I think, $1 million contract, and you're $30,000 in debt.
Yeah.
How the heck does that happen? First of all, is that true? And if so, how does that happen?
Yeah. After my first year in the NFL, I on paper made $1.2 million, and I asked the same question you did. When I found that out, and I was like, who's spending my money? And it's kind of like, well, and what ended up happening is, even with a political science degree and an economics and policy degree, I didn't know how to manage my personal finances. I didn't know what to do with money. I didn't know how to say no to people. One of the things that I learned as well in the NFL, you get paid the second week in September until the end of your season, but then you don't get paid for about 8 months, right? Until you get to that next September. So I didn't have a budget. I didn't save. I didn't know how to invest. And more importantly, I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to let other people's problems stay other people's problems. And that's why I was broke after making $1.2 million on paper.
You said somewhere, though, that you saw that a lot in NFL locker rooms, Ryan. Players didn't know how to manage money.
All the time, all the time. And it's not just in the NFL, right? I wrote an article, the 5 things NFL players go broke on, and it was, wildly successful. But the secret is that's all of us, right? But a lot of guys in the NFL, 78% of NFL players are bankrupt 2 years after they're done playing in the NFL. And, one of the ththings that I saw, an example, I had a teammate, the Pittsburgh Steelers, young cat, said, hey, man, you need to learn how to invest. Here's how you do it. I'll walk you through it. I'll sit down with you and help you buy your first stock, just to change your mindset about money. And, oh, by the way, do not go buy a new car. Do not go buy a new car. Do not go buy a new car. And this young player who was making $435,000, sounds like a lot, right? But minus taxes and all those other things, he went out and bought a brand new Porsche Panamera, 4-door Porsche. And, and then 6 months later, he was out of the NFL. And one of the things I tell people is delay your purchases 3 months to 3 years. He had a Porsche Panamera without winter tires going back to Philadelphia, without equity, investments, or any type of cash. And that's preventable. And those kind of stories happen all the time in the NFL.
I'm surprised that agents aren't more proactive about literacy with their players. Or do agents, you wrote a piece saying that the front office kind of likes you guys being broke, right? Because it's easier for them to negotiate.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised agents aren't more involved.
Well, at the end of the day, agents need you to like them, right? They're this unique piece of the NFL players, a life. And that's not their job. An agent's job isn't to help you make sound decisions. An agent's job is to get you as much money as possible. And a lot of guys, if agents start trying to tell them, hey, do this, do that, with your money, one, they're going to get suspicious. Two, you're telling somebody not to enjoy what they've worked for, which is really hard to do, especially if you haven't done it yourself. And three, you start to distance yourself away from your player. Not a lot of people take advice well, right? I mean, let alone financial advice. And it's something that's very delicate. And there have been stories in the past of agents who have recommended a financial advisor to a player only to have that financial advisor take all of their money.
Right.
So agents try and stay in their lane. But you mentioned it, front offices, they want players to be broke because, Joe, if I'm willing to pay you $2 million, but you're broke, you're going to take an $800,000 contract with $20,000 to sign. I just made money. I'm laughing at the golf course. You're feeling good, kind of, but you're undervalued. And you're hoping already in signing this deal for your next deal. It's a brutal process.
I feel like for a lot of us, the correlation there is credit card debt, right? I mean, you've also told stories elsewhere where you lived in a family where you couldn't believe you could actually pay off your debt. Like you weren't going to have debt forever, right?
Nobody in my family talked about paying off debt. I grew up in a household that you could pay down debt, get more debt. And it wasn't until after I bought my first home that people my what I call consigliere said, now you should pay off this house. I said, what do you mean pay it off? He said, well, you can actually own it without paying a mortgage. I said, well, no, I didn't, and
like what?
But that's like you mentioned that. I mean, that's how many credit card bills do we pay the minimum on? Now learning that you're going to incur almost more in costs due to fees than the payment you just made. And so, whether it's overpaying on your principal, I always tell people, if you have a mortgage, look at how much the principal is. Usually it's like $200, right? Or $250 of a
It's
$1,500 or
so
$1,900
discouraging.
payment. Oh, but if you double that principal payment alone, you can cut your mortgage, years in half. So we just have to be better as a society, teaching each other how to actually pay off debt, understanding what good and bad debt is. Debt for shoes is not good debt, right?
Yeah.
But debt to get a computer programming degree, that is good debt. So, but those are all the things that I learned after 2 degrees at Notre Dame and after making $1.2 million worth of mistakes.
You talk about money and stress a lot, and all of us feel it. I mean, we're working paycheck to paycheck. You've seen all the numbers, Ryan. What's the first step to getting out of that stress, to starting to eliminate that stress?
Looking at price versus cost. When you're purchasing items, the new iPhone 12 is going to be, $1,200. Well, that's the price of that iPhone. How much does it cost for you to live, to eat, right? To take your kids to school? I mean, well, now add that cost with that price to that iPhone, and you begin to start seeing how much things really cost in your life. And one of the ways to start digging yourself out and creating some space is to, one, know that it's extremely hard to do. Find out the cost of your living and add that to the price of the things you want. You'll start seeing that a $5,000 iPhone's not worth it, right? That a $7,000 trip to see your in-laws isn't financially responsible. You're going to have to say no to yourself. I mean, one of the hardest things in the NFL, Joe, is having the money to do whatever you want and saying, I'm not going to do that. I could go buy a Mercedes today. You know what? That's not really smart. That doesn't fit my financial plan. And it takes some time. You go and buy something right away, you have it. You can show it to your friends. You can post it or whatever. But if you don't spend money, well, nobody really sees this, and nobody sees that growth that you have. And maybe it's because I'm an offensive lineman, but I could care less what people think about my money,
Is that the offensive lineman mentality right there, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, other people are going to, shine around you, but, where's the work really being done? You know what I mean? Hey, anybody could run down 40 yards down the field and catch a football. I could have done that all day, right? But no, it's, as a lineman, you learn to be successful with your success out of the public eye. And that's the reason why a lot of linemen in the NFL are successful financially.
Could Notre Dame have used a little bit more of that mentality back here a couple of weeks ago in the in the playoffs?
Well, not just Notre Dame. How many of us, when faced with the opportunity of a lifetime, choose not to believe in our abilities and preparation? I mean, the difference between winning and losing is hesitation. And Notre Dame just hesitated a little bit when they played Alabama and when they played Clemson towards the end of the year. You can't hesitate, and it's 3rd and 12, and you're going against a Von Miller or things like that in the NFL. You better believe in yourself. And when you get the opportunity to succeed, whether that's a pitch, whether that's a job interview, why not go knock it out of the park? Why not believe in yourself going into it and take every shot? So many of us don't do that, and we saw that kind of happen with Notre Dame the past couple of weeks of their season.
That's a great transition. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your book, Mindset for Mastery, because we all have that doubt. I mean, not these college players, as you know, Ryan, or you in the Super Bowl or playing in the NFL. As you said, there's no room for doubt, yet all of us on a daily basis, we doubt that we can get ourselves out of credit card debt. We doubt that we can actually be rich. We doubt that we can influence our community. What's the first step to removing this negative self-talk that we all seem to have?
Well, I mean, one of the things you said is there's no room for doubt. Yes, there is.
Oh,
right. Understand that doubt's going to be a part of your process, that you're doing something new. I always say when we choose our favorite ice cream, there's no stress there, right? I know I'm going to go get a peppermint bonbon waffle cone. It's delicious.
That is hugely stressful for me, man. Hugely stressful for me.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's not your ice cream, right? But know that, I had to learn to perform in the NFL and to create a second career after my NFL career. Doubt's going to be there. I mean, I used to think, Joe, every game that I was going to give up 6 sacks. And instead of worrying about that, after about 5 years, I said, you know what? This is a part of my process. This doubt means I'm doing something. I'm going to perform at this apex level. And so accepting fear, accepting doubt, realizing that thoughts aren't facts can really bring us peace, right? Okay, I'm going to get myself out of credit card debt. I doubt I can do it. Good. I'm going to try it anyways, right? And it's funny too, because parents always ask me similar questions. I say, well, what do you teach your kids to do about doubt? Well, they got to overcome it. Oh, great. Overcome it, right? Recognize it, and even with fear, with doubt, with mistakes, right? People think too with personal finance, you got to be perfect. Hello, you and I will tell people, Joe, there's mistakes were made. What do you do next? And can you make room for that self-doubt to a place where you can let it not stop you, and you can continue to go beyond and perform and save and invest, ask new questions, and reach new heights?
You found some inspiration for your investing journey. I know from a guy that his name was Warren Buffett, and turned out that wasn't his name, but it was close. But seriously, where I mean, people find inspiration, Ryan, from you, but where do you look to for financial inspiration?
Well, for me, I look to the people around me. The wealthiest people I know, you never know they were wealthy, right? Wealth doesn't look rich. And it took me a while to notice that. The quieter guys in the locker room who were driving, manufacturer issued cars were the wealthiest guys, the guys who weren't stressed out, weren't asking when we were going to get paid, even though they had made $2 million already that year. And so when you start looking at who around you has wealth, who's doing it the right way, right? Typically, you'll find that person's not stressed. Maybe they have a car that's, doesn't fit their wealth status, but they own it. They're not worried about it. They got no payments. And so you start asking these questions. What money? Well, I save $60 to $80 out of every $100 I make. Whoa, did you ever have a roommate? Yeah, I had 3 roommates at one point, and they're all paying me money. But that's what I wanted to do because I had a long-term vision. So and it's out there. And one of the tough things, though, is we talk about financial failures less than we talk about our financial successes. And it's so hard to know who really has money. My brother-in-law says if you had to see on a license plate how much of a percentage of that car that person owned, we'd see a lot different cars out on the road, right? And it's so easy to pull the wool over someone's eyes with money. You just got to go out, seek it, just like you would a good recipe or a good place to stay for a vacation.
It's like there's 2 different games being played, I mean, you played this game in front of millions of people on a field. There's the game people think we're playing, which is loud and proud, and I'm driving this beautiful car. But then this more secretive game, like the Millionaire Next Door kind of game.
Well, that was my favorite book I've ever read about money, The Millionaire Next Door. I mean, big hat, no cattle. That's a phrase that I learned, and what's the guy say? I drink 2 types of beer, free and Budweiser. I love that line because it's so interesting when I ask people, when I speak especially about financial literacy, I say, what do rich people do? And a lot of rich people say, well, they do this, they spend that, they go on vacations, they do this. Okay. Each and every one of you just gave me what you think rich people do. What do wealthy people actually do? They build out, not up. They have life insurance. They have income investments. They talk about things like cash flow, equity. They always act from a position of strength and opportunity, never, trying to win on the margins. And that's a totally different way to live life. And one of my great friends says, wealth looks well rested. And if you're trying to do so much and you need more credit to really live your lifestyle, you're not really there. And it can be embarrassing for some people. I know for me as an African-American man, Joe, when I first got my first car, it was a used Escalade, but I wanted rims on it. And part of the reason for me was I didn't want people to treat me without respect. Well, it took me a while to learn that it doesn't matter what I look like for someone to respect me. You're going to respect me one way or another, and learning those things is a process, but it can be very, very difficult.
I want to ask you a question about your degree in economic policy, because you're spreading the word about financial literacy. But as you know, not just from your degree, but from all the speaking you've done, the research you've done, systemic poverty is a huge problem, right? And my friend John Hope Bryant talks about how there are families where this stuff isn't taught. We also have seen financial literacy doesn't work. Like financial literacy programs often fail. What do you think the first step is for us to break some of this systemic poverty issue we have. I mean, don't get me wrong. We could probably, Ryan, you and I talk. I'm not asking you to solve a problem nobody's been able to solve for the time the U.S. has been around. But where do you think we're getting it wrong?
Well, we do need to teach it. I know about FOIL, first, outside, inside, last on an algebra problem, right? Then I did about leveraging interest rates. Who tells us that we can actually negotiate with the bank? How about an entire class on negotiation? Isn't that an important skill in life? And where we get it wrong is that so many cultures do this, right? There are entire cultures where, there's negotiation, there's no price on anything. Every price of something is negotiable. And it's because you need to know and be prepared for what you can afford, but also them. I mean, there's an entire world of banking in the Islamic world that doesn't deal with interest. That's a totally different way to look at money and to purchase things. So I do believe we need to teach it in schools. And I'm on the board here at Economic Literacy Colorado, and we've taught over 15,000 teachers how to incorporate financial literacy into their programs. We've done a stock market program that allows students to mimic purchasing stocks and watching that. And until we're aware of it, how could we possibly know? And looking at the education opportunities we have, whether it's a week in the summer or it's a part of a mandated education, platform, we need to educate our youth, because when we have financial literacy, there's more ownership in communities, there's more engagement in communities, it makes communities safer, and it allows for greater growth and production.
You do lots of speaking around the country, around the world on financial literacy. Where can people find you, Ryan?
Yeah, check me out, ryanharris68.com, or you can look me up on LinkedIn as well. And I'm always happy to be a resource. And I'm thankful for you, Joe, and your partner, the OG, for everything you guys do to bring this platform and these conversations to the forefront. It's really, really important for us moving forward.
All right, I got two very important things here. And by the way, everybody, we'll link to Ryan on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com if you're out walking the dog or whatever. But for those of you joining us on YouTube, flash the ring. You got to flash the ring.
You mean this little paperweight right there?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I see why the ladies like diamonds. It goes with everything, Joe. It goes with a jacket, sweatpants. It's fantastic.
How great was it? Was it better being on the field that day winning, or better when you got that ring? I suppose being on the field that day.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing because you're on fire, Joe. On the field, no question. You're on fire. I mean, everything you've worked for, you're living in this moment. And I remember walking through as the confetti was falling down, sticking to my sweaty face. I'm like, I'm going through the wormhole right here. You don't know which way is up or down. And you're like, hey, I'm just here. And then all of a sudden, I go through the confetti and, there's Tim Cook from Apple. Hey, Tim, let's get a photo. He's like, sure. And oh, by the way, you're walking out and Eli Manning's there and all these people are there. And I'm still looking for Beyonce and Lady Gaga. Right. And they're my parents, and it's just insane. And what I realized instantly is that when you believe in yourself, when you win the Super Bowl, everything you believe about yourself comes true for other people. I told people that my sacrifice was worth it. I told people that I was good enough to win. And I was living that realization. And I want people to have that moment in their lives. And financial literacy is a great way to get started on living the life that you want and showing the discipline that can create success long term.